Welcome to Fan4Racing Radio. We are here for our episode 2514, which is the good, bad, and ugly of this past weekend, Jay.
Well, it certainly was, especially as we get to a couple of topics. That certainly could be the case in several of them. So I know when we talked earlier, you said that Chris was having some power issues. Did you get any update from him?
I did not get an update from him. I did send him the hot topics. So he may join us midstream here.
All right. Well, hopefully things are okay with him. I guess if you want to start, which one you want to start with? Either Kyle Larson himself or
which one do you want to start with?
I know going in, Kyle Larson doing the double was obviously a big storyline, as it should be for motorsport. So we'll start there, and then we also have to look at just Indy as well, because I know I saw an update today. We had more issues after the 500.
I saw that as well. So Kyle Larson doing the double. I think I really admire Kyle Larson. I think the fact that he wants to take that on and do the double is a really good thing. I just think that with the situation being what it is, the last 2 years he's really had a hard go of it. Last year it was rain. This year it was wrecks. He wrecked out of the Indy 500. He also wrecked out of NASCAR's race, the Coca-Cola 600. So, it's just unfortunate. I would like to see him do it again or try it again. Or maybe the third time is the charm. I think Kyle Larson is up to the task. He's just had a lot of difficulties the last couple of years, and it is not an easy task.
No doubt. Last year, again, the hype was around the weather, which prevented him even from being at the NASCAR event. And it was a driver error, I guess, or mistake of pitting when it came to how he finished at Indianapolis. And then you had the weather issue. So, there were high expectations of where he could finish both races. But honestly, this year, even just going into the 500, and I don't know why, and I would not say the team wasn't prepared or he wasn't prepared, but the crash already in practice, and that maybe got him behind. They didn't qualify but 21st, and then he ended up crashing again. It just didn't seem like they were at the same level of preparation or top speed and car as they were last year. Then when we get to the Coca-Cola 600, to the NASCAR side, and this might come back to it of the pressure, mental pressure, but started, I believe, outside front row, if I'm not mistaken, second. Maybe then was trying to do makeup. We know Kyle Larson drives on the edge and at any given time can overdrive the car more than the capability of the car. We've seen that in the past. So that could have been the case. I feel like maybe it was of, well, hey, I didn't get a good finish at Indy. I'm going to make sure I get a good one here. I don't know, but you're right. It just did not go well all the way around. But that happened. So I'm with you. I know it was a 2-year deal, and there's been a lot of discussion around it starting from last year. I'm not making it to this NASCAR race. And that's where I said the mental aspect. If this year he knew, hey, no matter what, I have to make it to Charlotte for the Coke 600, that was more on his mind than anything else. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and they did start late too.
Right. So like I said, that might be a little. I know he's a great driver, and you would think would be able to compartmentalize it, but that's still, you have that knowledge, and it's got to be on your mind, and they do everything they can to make it happen. And I want to see the two organizations, NASCAR and IndyCar, work together to make it a possibility. I know there's a couple other drivers, Kyle Busch being one, that it's been at least discussed of a possibility. Because it is, like you said, a phenomenal feat just to even attempt it. I mean, give him credit for attempting it. It did not go well. We got 2 DNFs, but to attempt it. And there are only a few drivers, a handful of drivers when we look at who have attempted it and done it. It's not, like you said, it's not an easy task by any means. And that's just purely the racing, let alone prep time, the travel, and everything else. So I admire him, and we know that's what he does on a regular basis.
It is. I will say, Seth Agert posted on X that with the most recent crash, Kyle Larson is the second driver to DNF from both the Indy 500 and the Coca-Cola 600 since Robbie Gordon in 1997. And then he adds, the only other driver to DNF both races, not on the same day, was Cale Yarborough, and that was back in 1967. So, that's one thing. And then the other thing that I noticed over on social media, Justin Marks, Adam Stern posted that Justin Marks said, if I was running everything, I would do everything in my power to make sure things like the double can happen. People need to be working in a direction to try to make it happen versus trying not to make it happen. So that was a comment from Justin Marks posted by Adam Stern. So I agree with that. I think we should be trying to do everything in our power to make sure that it happens and not make it more difficult than what it already is. But again, I just think that Kyle Larson did his absolute best. And you might be right, Jay, that there were a lot of things weight on his mind with the fact that there was rain to start the Indianapolis 500 that delayed the start of the race. I'm sure that added an element of extra pressure to the situation. And it's just unfortunate. And I know we have no control over the rain, but it's too bad that had to happen for 2 years in a row to kind of add that extra pressure to Kyle Larson. Because if anybody, I think, could do it, I think that Kyle Larson, last year he qualified in 6th place. So I think that he could, do well given the right circumstances.
Well, and that's why I said, just overall, it looked like the team was in a better position. Again, I'm not down in the team. I mean, not everybody's on perfect every week out. So whatever was a little different this year. I know we had a lot of things going on at Indianapolis, and we'll talk a little bit about that of that. But the aspect of making the Charlotte race, the fact that NASCAR did change their rule this year, if and they didn't specifically say it was for this situation, but it really became about because of this. If you do not make it to a NASCAR race and don't qualify and they don't give you the waiver, they'll let you into the playoffs, but you lose all your playoff points and everything else, which we've talked about Kyle Larson has. So like I said, I think that just kind of added to that of making sure. Remind me to go later and vote wherever I can vote to put Justin Marks in charge of everything. Is that how you put it? If he were running everything, I vote for him to be running everything. So by all means, because I fully agree with that. And I'm not even, this, Sharon, I'm not even a big IndyCar fan, but something like that is good for motorsports. And I am a fan of motorsports. So yeah, I'm all about it. I know a few years.
A good cooperation between the two different series.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, of who is it? I know last year, and it's the people that made it such, I'll use the term people, that made it such of, well, he chose NASCAR over IndyCar and he should have been there because that, again, I mean, they did everything they could within their control to do both. It wasn't a matter of this one's more important or whatever. The goal and the want was to do both. And that, like I said, we look at somebody coming from the Australian Supercars over to run in our series, I mean, just why? And we've had a couple now go over there and run. I mean, I think that is great and it helps everybody.
Absolutely. Yes, it definitely does. I guess we started with the ugly part of the weekend. It had its positive side to it, but it's just unfortunate that it worked out the way it did for Kyle Larson.
Well, I would say the good is that he did get another attempt at it. The bad is it just didn't go well, and the ugly again is, from my perspective, is how the people. I want to say fans, but like I said, if you're being that way, to me, you're not a fan, or you're really one-minded. I'll set that soapbox aside. I got it out, but I didn't step up onto it.
Okay, now I did see a post also that Kyle Larson says that he hasn't made up his mind if he's going to give it another go or not. I'm trying to find where I saw that.
Well, and again,
Kyle Larson uncertain of future attempts of Indy 500 and Coke 600 double. So he's unsure at this point, so we'll have to wait and see if he decides later on to give it another go.
And because there again, same with last year, they were saying Kyle Larson chose this. There is so much more to it. The team, the sponsors, of everything has to come together. And that's why a lot of times we haven't seen a whole lot of that is within their right. If an IndyCar team has an open seat to say, we want a driver that's totally focused here, get that. I understand that and respect that. Hendrick Motorsports could have said, no, you can't do this. It's outside of NASCAR. We don't want you doing it. But again, I think they were looking bigger picture of just a multitude sides. Again, to me, it is good for sponsors. Even if, again, the results don't maybe necessarily show it of that. But so, yeah, I think that's where the issue lands, because that was a 2-year deal, and they weren't even sure if they were going to be able to get the 2-year deal in after the reaction from last year and NASCAR changing the rules. So I'm happy that they were able to do it. Again, unfortunately, it wasn't more successful or any kind of success other than doing it. But that alone is an accomplishment, to having actually made both and run in both.
Exactly. Talking about, we talked a little bit here about the IndyCar series, or I'm sorry, the Supercar series, and how good that's been for the sport. Well, there's another driver, another guy who is looking at doing that, and that's Jack Perkins from the Australian. Jack Perkins is a supercar driver coming to the Xfinity Series. So I see that is definitely one of the good things. We've seen it with Shane Van Gisbergen, and it sounds like upcoming Jack Perkins is headed to the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, again, I'm all for that, and I'm excited to see it. I'm trying to think. I know Richard Childress Racing has had one come in as well, and off the top of my head, I cannot think of his name. We saw it now back when Marcus Ambrose. Again, we've evolved in the way things line up. I know it's not always possible, but when Marcus Ambrose came over, he left Australia in the Supercar Series, came over. Shane Van Gisbergen made that decision although he got the 1 or 2 starts, wanted to come over and go full time, which he's been in the process of that up in the Cup Series now. So we'll see how much more that can be done. Like I said, of the way the schedules overlay, if you're running for a championship, I know obviously from Australia, it's even harder. You think the Indy to Charlotte double is tough, going Australia to somewhere else and doing a double, that would be amazing. But I'm trying to think. I know Kyle Larson obviously went over to Australia, run sprint cars. I'm trying to think who was in the Super 8 series that they did. But again, just that it's good for motorsports. And in this day and age with the technology, I think more fans are aware of the Super 8 series. Some of them I had watched it before Marcus Ambrose came, so I knew where he had come from. At that time, it was MAV TV. I know we got so many more now that cover every form of motorsports. At that time, it was MAV TV, though, that you got to watch those type of things on.
Yes, indeed. And we're becoming a global community, if you will, with social media and all the different things that are going on. And I see this as nothing but positive. I don't see any negatives to it at all. That we have drivers that want to be a part of NASCAR racing and doing their part. Like you mentioned, Marcus Ambrose has done it. We had one, Pablo Montoya. We've had just all kinds of different drivers. IndyCar drivers have come to race. Pastrana, I can't think of his first name right now.
From the X Games, Travis Pastrana.
Travis Pastrana from the X Games came over and raced in NASCAR. Jack Perkins wants to follow in the footsteps of Shane Van Gisbergen, and I'm all for it. I think that's great, and I think it just brings our global community closer together, and it makes us want to watch Supercars. It makes them want to watch NASCAR. So I think it's a great thing.
It was, and even when Ricky Carmichael came into the Truck Series from Monster Energy Supercross from the bikes, Jimmy Johnson and Haley Deegan come from the stadium trucks. It used to be Ivan Stewart's off-road, but all of that, again, I just see as a big, we've seen some of the drag racing crossover and connections. Tony Stewart is now drag racing. It just engages everybody in motorsports, and I think that's a healthy thing all the way around. I'm not going to call you out, Sharon, but you're closer than me. I'll just say that. Back in the day when we saw the likes of Mario Andretti do things like this, was there the same lashback that we get nowadays? That's what it made me wonder about that, because we've seen them with the Daytona 500 versus the Indy 500. If you had that type of deal back then. Well, not that you go all the way back then. I just say that.
I don't recall any. But yeah, I wasn't really a NASCAR fan in those days. But I will say that I'm suspecting that there probably was some backlash. There's always opinions on all sides of any topic. So what's different is they didn't have the social media where everybody can voice an opinion and it goes all over the place in a matter of seconds. So I don't think that we probably heard about it as much back then as we hear about it now. That's just my personal thoughts on it.
You read my mind. As I was waiting for you to answer, it hit me, and I was thinking, be like, yeah, back then, people may have complained about it, but it was with their buddies in the garage, and that's at the bar, and that's as far as it went because there was no social media. So you're right, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's made a huge difference in hearing both sides of any story, and we certainly do hear all sides when it comes to social media.
Speaking of, there you go, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You got platforms, social media, Sirius XM radio, YouTube shows such as Fan4Racing here. Yeah, that brings good, bad, and ugly with it, I guess, if you will.
It's just part and parcel of the package, I guess. So it is interesting that we hear so much from everybody. And it is good to hear other people's perspectives. I don't know that anybody's ever convinced me of their side of it when it comes to the negative side of doing something like this. And maybe that's a fault on my part. But I hope that I've convinced people that there is a positive side. We'll put it that way.
Well, I can understand the negative side is there's a risk. If something happens, such as we saw him not get to race or he gets hurt. We saw that with Kyle Busch running in the Xfinity Series, or even Chase Elliott just doing a activity outside of racing. That one, again, it's a high risk. I wouldn't say it was a outlandish activity that he maybe shouldn't have done it, depending on what he had been intaking. And we've heard that too. What was it? Brad Keselowski's was just playing disc golf, things like that happen. And there is a lot of investment in a driver and a sponsor in the championship, and that's why I say I do understand if a team or owner or whatever says no, that they want to protect that investment and whatnot. So I do understand that, but there are some things that are worth the risk. And then you say on the flip side of convincing of the positive, I mean, we see it. In my opinion, drivers that spend more time in the driver's seat, whatever format it be, seem to be better. Keeps them sharp or whatever, however you want to put it. I think it is beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it's beneficial. And I think it does far outweigh what the risks are. Now, it probably depends on who you are as to what your perspective of that is. If you're the one that's hurt in that situation, you might not consider it more positive than the risk. And I certainly get that. And I do see the point that you're saying. I just don't think that it has convinced me that it is not worth the risk.
Well, and that goes back to of how often do we see it? I mean, there have been occasions, for me, I view, and at the time I wasn't necessarily a huge Kyle Busch fan. I respected the talent, but when he came back and won that championship after recovering for that, I really believe that's where there became more Kyle Busch fans. And that goes back to, and I got another little soapbox up. I'll try not to get all the way on it, but that goes back to if the team is committed, allowing them to run for a championship, it adds that excitement. Can they overcome missing races?
And he missed like 11 races.
11, yep.
And still won the championship, which is pretty incredible. And it just tells you the type of driver and the talent that Kyle Busch has to be able to do that. And maybe it was a little bit of a turning point for Kyle Busch. He probably missed those 11 races more than anyone can imagine. And, it gives you a different perspective on things.
Yeah, certainly. There's so many levels to it, but I really think it was kind of a shift in the fan aspect to him. Like I said, to me, it was a matter of can he overcome it. At that time, you had to get a win and be in the top 30 in points, which is where he had to get in. I believe when the playoffs started, he had 3 wins and was like 28th, 26th, somewhere in there. So he met all the qualifications. From there, he got into the playoffs and continued to win and went on to win the championship. To me, like I said, that is just an absolutely huge success story.
It is.
And that's what it's all about.
Definitely. So where do we go from here?
Well, being that we're talking about Kyle Busch, it was announced, I think Friday is maybe when it came out, if I'm not mistaken. But Kyle Busch says signed a 1-year contract with Richard Childress Racing. It was an extension, option of an extension. So both sides, and I don't know exactly when it comes to legal terms, both agreed to it, that the option was picked up. So he will be with Richard Childress Racing for 1 more year. And from what I heard on the Richard Childress statement was they wanted to do that so that they have 1 year now and they want to have it done prior to or not have to worry about it mid-season. But continue building what they're doing, which, again, we've seen signs of improvement. Maybe not great strides, but going in the right direction anyway, if they can get a little bit of bad luck out of the way. But then working on another maybe 3-year deal.
And I've been meaning to say this, and let me just kind of interrupt us for just a moment. I did hear from Chris. He is still without power, Jay. So,
all right. Well, he's always kind of been in the dark, so I hope he's at least watching or goes back and watches it.
Well, he might watch this. You might hear about that.
Watch my messenger go off here in a minute and go bing, bing, hey, hey.
Okay, well, moving right along here. We are talking about Kyle Busch signing that 1-year contract extension with RCR. I really think it's a good thing. We know we're going to get another year of Kyle Busch. And they signed some other agreements too. Didn't they just sign a technical alliance with somebody outside of NASCAR that could help them? Or I might be thinking of Keselowski and Roush Fenway, Keselowski Racing. But maybe there's something in the works here where they're seeing some things going in the right direction. And, Kyle Busch could have a really good season next year. And if he does have a really good season, maybe he could have another really good season. And I know that's wishful thinking to a certain degree. But even if he is only going to be with NASCAR for 1 more year, it would be good to do it well with RCR and do his farewell tour, if that's the case. And I don't know that it is. That's purely speculation on my part.
Right, absolutely.
I just think it would be really good for him to have that 1 more year to kind of celebrate his accomplishments and everything else. So, and maybe RCR's seeing signs of turning their ship around, and it would be a really great thing all the way around for him to have that 1 more year.
And we know they're capable of it. And this kind of surprised me during Kyle Busch as I watched one of his media sessions where he talked about it. He admitted that when he first came to RCR, and they had the 3 wins in that first year, that they were doing some things that were legal at the time. But NASCAR said, okay, we don't want done anymore. The Fords had that with an area where they were working. They said, okay, we don't like it. We're going to put a stop to it. It wasn't illegal at the time, but we're going to make it so. And it hurt the Ford teams, trying to remember what part of the car, something in the rear end. But, he said there were some things that when NASCAR changed their rules, it definitely affected what RCR was doing. So they're still staying within the rules, but don't have that speed that they had. So they're trying to find that back or find it in another place. We talked about that with Ross Chastain going from the backup car to or going from the primary wreck to the backup car. It's not like you can just go grab the steering wheel and put it in the other car. You can't go grab speed from here and put it there. We'd have a whole different story and hot topics to be talking about there.
Yes, indeed. And they worked that entire race to continue improvements throughout the race for him to be able to finish as well as he did. But getting back to Kyle Busch, I'm happy to see the 1-year contract extension. I think it's going to be good for RCR. I think it's going to be good for Kyle Busch. And I think it's going to be good for the fans and NASCAR. So it's a win-win-win-win-win situation all the way around.
And here's the other thing. I know, again, and I will use the term fan discussion here of, well, he should go somewhere else that's got better equipment or in better position. Honestly, where? First off, what's available, and there isn't a whole lot of options. I know at the time when he signed, there was the possibility of Colleague Racing as well as Spire Motorsports, and let's just use those 2 as examples. Although they had an established team, they were not as established as RCR. Granted, RCR was not necessarily running the best they were capable of, but they really did have the full infrastructure that they weren't trying to build that as well as speed and whatnot into the cars. So as we saw, when Kyle Busch came over there, was able to win right away in that first year. Going to another organization like that, it's and there are some drivers that have taken that chance to go to a team to help the team rebuild or reorganize. Kyle just wasn't in that position that he wanted to. That was his choice. He could have. That wasn't what he wanted to do.
Yeah, Austin Dillon recommended to his grandpa that they bring Kyle Busch over to RCR. And I think it was a good recommendation that he gave his granddad. And, this Gen 7 car is not an easy adjustment. Kyle Busch already said that not having the practices kind of hurt him in having his car race ready when the race began. Well, the Gen 7 car has been a huge adjustment for a lot of drivers. And, when you're used to giving feedback, you know exactly what's happening with the car, and you can give that feedback to your team. It's a lot different when all of a sudden you don't know what the problem is and you can't give that feedback anymore. It makes it so much more difficult. The only thing you can do is say, this is what's happening, and leave it to the crew chief now to make that determination. So I think that's the position that Kyle Busch has been in at RCR. And I think that's a huge adjustment, for Kyle Busch, for everybody when they're dealing with that Gen 7 car.
And that's exactly right, Sharon. Kyle Busch, and he was honest about it as he came to understand it. He knew he was having a tougher time with the next gen car. And this was a few weeks ago where I saw an interview with that, where he talked about it is now about communicating with his crew. Yes. He used to be able to say, hey, this is happening, lower the right rear wedge 2 rounds, take a half pound of pressure out of the right rear tire, and give specific of what to do. He doesn't have that capability anymore. So now he's got to communicate and relay what the car's doing, and the engineers be the one to say, okay, to fix that, this is what we got to do. And we've talked about that in the past of maybe the difference of drivers that grew up working on the cars, building them, and then driving them because they had that understanding. Nowadays, and we've seen it, it can't happen because Kyle Larson was the first to admit, he said, I have no idea. It's a car, I drive it. I don't know nothing about it,
Exactly.
So then you got to work on that communication of this is what the car's doing or I need it to do, and relay that and have an understanding with your crew chief and the engineers and everybody to then adjust to that. And I thought it was big of Kyle to admit that and talk about it.
Yeah, I thought that was great when he revealed that little bit about himself and what he's dealing with. I think I like it when drivers reveal those kind of things and kind of share with us. Dale Earnhardt does a lot of that as well. And I think that does endear fans to that race car driver. It makes them more human. So I think that could be part of why people are cheering for Kyle Busch at this point. He's shared those vulnerabilities, and fans have endeared him as far as being a driver on the racetrack and dealing with the challenges that he deals with. So I think that's a positive. Where do you want to go to next, Jay?
Well, we don't have a whole lot of information, but it does involve communication. Christopher Bell has new communication coming to him via spotter as Stevie Reeves, and I'm just going based off of what information we have, quit is the term being used. And Christopher Bell said that's his decision, and I'm going to leave it at that. And that was his words, quoted in the article. So hope it works out. I mean, again, not a whole lot I can say of if something's not working, you got to make a change. We saw that with Spire Motorsports and Rodney Childers. I will say this, a spotter, although important, I get that, and working, again, building that communication, how much a driver wants to hear, how much they want constant talk or sporadic, how it's said and everything, that takes time to build that relationship and communication, but I don't view it as important. And a driver might say differently. I know, obviously, it's a race like Talladega. There, it's more important than maybe the crew chief. But as a whole, I think you can swap out a spotter easier than you can a crew chief.
Yes. And, it's not like Christopher Bell's been having a really bad season. When you think about it, he's won a lot of races, but just like, and I use this analogy quite a lot, when Babe Ruth was at the height of his career, he had as many strikeouts as he did home runs. And, I could say that is somewhat true for Christopher Bell. He has really, really good races, and he goes on a string of wins, but he's had his share of not so good races as well. And so communication with your spotter is of utmost importance, because they are your eyes in the sky, as they say, to tell you what's going on the track. They can see what you cannot see as a driver behind the wheel. And I'm just speculating on that, just based on what drivers have said and what you can see from the inside of that car out on the track. They let them know when they can make those passes, where they can make those passes. They let them know what the other drivers are doing. And maybe it just wasn't a good fit between the spotter and the driver in this particular case. Or maybe there were other things going on. We don't know. It's all speculation. But the change was made. And in this case, it was the spotter who said, I'm going to quit for the sake of the organization. And so he stepped aside, allowing them to bring in another spotter. And Philpott is going to be the new spotter now for Christopher Bell. And we'll see what happens if things get better for them. But I got to tell you, Christopher Bell's had a pretty good season so far.
Well, and you kind of hit on it there, and I was trying to come with a different word since we maybe overused speculation last time. But I mean, that is the word we'd have to use. The possibility is, if I were to put myself in that position, we did see where Christopher Bell went on, like you said, that hot streak, got 3 wins in a row, has not been up front. I know he got the All-Star win. I was trying to recall if there wasn't one race, though, where he was out front and lost the lead and made the comment of, I wish I'd have known what line they were running as they were catching me. So just playing to that possibility of that, you mentioned obviously telling us a spotter of, hey, you're gaining on this, or where the guy in front of you is running, but it's also what's behind you. This car is faster than you, gains this in the corner using this line. Either try and go up there and run it yourself and see if you can gain, or get up there and put some dirty air up there, because that's where they're making time. Call it the air blocking. So I just, as we were talking about it, I do recall a driver, and I don't know for sure that it was even Christopher Bell, but there are little things like that. It's not just a matter of, well, you said I was clear and I wasn't, and I hit this person or something. That there's a lot more to it, because it's all encompassing. Like I said, what's in front of you? Hey, the guy in front of you is running high, go low so you don't get in his dirty air and can get around him quicker. Coordinating with other spotters. Hey, my guy's faster, he's coming. Coordinating with other spotters of when they're going to pit, either with you or not with you. If you want that spot in front of you open when you pit, that's up to the spotters then to work and say, hey, we're going to pit on this lap or in this window. Hey, we wait a lap and let us pit first type deal. A lot of that goes to the spotters, and they're talking amongst themselves up top and relaying to the crew chiefs then. So there's a lot to it for sure.
It's a very dynamic position. And sometimes by the time you get out of your mouth what it is you're trying to convey to the driver, there's no time for the driver to react. So that can happen. The other thing is and you kind of talked a little bit about it, is that the drivers, the spotters, have so many balls that are, going on all at the same time. I know some tracks you have to have more than one spotter because the track is so big that the spotter can't see the entire track. Indianapolis is one of those tracks. You've got a big pavilion in the way to be able to see the entire track. So you've got to have more than one spotter. But those spotters have a very dynamic position where things are happening consistently and constantly, and they've got a lot to convey between the spotters. And you brought up that, that they're making arrangements with other spotters. They're talking for the drivers and trying to arrange things. In some tracks it might be, can you get behind us and push us and give us the aerodynamics that we need? Or, you do it for us now, we'll do it for you later, kind of thing, and making those kind of deals. There's just so much that the spotter is responsible for. And perhaps, and again, I'm speculating, perhaps, Stevie Reeves recognized that maybe it just wasn't the right job for him. And maybe he decided to step away because of that. We don't know why he chose to step away. But, when you're running for a championship, you want to make sure that you've got the right persons in the right spots. And that is super important. And so
the only last thing I want to add there is, and you're right, it's an unknown, so it's kind of a joke, but maybe he developed a fear of heights. We don't know.
We just don't know. Exactly right. Maybe there's something personal that's happening within his family dynamics that's causing him to want to step away. So we really cannot speculate. We just know how important a spotter is to any driver. And we're giving you some examples of their importance. We'll have to see how Philpott does in the position, and hopefully it'll work out well for Christopher Bell as he contends for the rest of this season and into the playoffs.
Well, and we know a type of organization, I will say that, of Joe Gibbs Racing, and they promote and use from within. So I know it said he had been transitioning into the spotter role already. But again, especially being that we know Christopher Bell is going to be a championship contender, already having 3 wins, that they got the resources to get it. And, if you will, halfway through the regular season, it's never, say, a great time to make a change like that. But I think they'll be all right.
I think they'll be just fine. So time always tells the rest of the story, right?
Absolutely.
Jay, do you mind picking the next topic while I work on something here?
Certainly. Talking about being negative, I hate to be the negative on this one, but we had Junior Motorsports Sammy Smith have a penalty at Charlotte, was DQ'd, not making it was weight requirement at the end of the race. This is one of those. I talked to Sharon earlier when we were kind of talking about it before we came on. I got no sympathy. I understand mistakes happen. You're trying to get the most and take advantage of all situations, but especially if you want to be a championship contender, you can't afford this. I don't care what team you are. And when we're looking at the point standings, it has put Sammy Smith on the bubble. The win he has guarantees him that spot back in. But to me, you're just putting your team behind, or the team is putting itself behind. I say that of it. Obviously, I don't think it was the driver that threw weight out or whatever happened that they didn't make weight. But as a team, as an organization, and we'll get into that a little bit more. If the organization ain't right, you got to make some changes. It just to me, and as a whole, being that Sammy Smith is one to bring this to light, it seems like this year on both the Cup and Xfinity, maybe not quite as much. We've seen a couple in the trucks, but the top 2, Xfinity and Cup, it just seems like we have had a lot more this year than in years past.
Yeah, I would agree with you. It just seems like it's been, I don't want to use the word rampant, but it's approaching that. It just seems like it has definitely, uh, we talk about first time's accident, second time's coincidence, third time it's become a habit. We've heard a lot of that this year with penalties and DQs and more than we have in the past. And part of it, I think, is that NASCAR is being more diligent in looking for people who are not playing by the rules. If you recall, when NASCAR brought the Gen 7 car into the Cup Series, they made the statement, and this is their words, not mine. They made the statement that they are looking to change the culture within NASCAR. And changing the culture means getting away from the concept, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And I know a lot of people still hang on to that to a certain degree, because from some perspectives, they feel like if you're not trying to push the envelope, we're not going to grow as a sport. We're not going to find new technologies and new ways of doing things. And that is true to a certain degree, but I think NASCAR is saying, let's do it in a legitimate kind of way. Let's not do it in a way that gives one person that competitive advantage. Let's do it in a way that everybody can learn from it and have access to it, and level the playing field. What's happened this year is that and I'm going to use the Cup Series in this particular case, but Hendrick Motorsport has figured it out. And so everybody else is kind of behind the curve, if you will, and trying to catch up. In the Xfinity Series, you've got drivers that are still in the old culture of trying to find that competitive advantage for their particular driver. And Jay, I know you are an advocate for let's give them some leeway to do that and experiment. But at the end of the season, and this is where I kind of come from. At the end of the season, do we really want to crown someone who's been caught cheating several times throughout the season? And I think Sammy Smith is kind of in that coincidink kind of area. First time's an accident, second time's coincidence. But the third time you've got a habit of doing something. That's not a driver or a team. Let me put it on the team. That's not a team I want to see recognized at the end of the season for being of championship caliber. Do we want to give them some leeway? And I think NASCAR has given them some leeway. And in fact, we have been given an example of that with the bumper situation, where they were given an area to work within, and they went outside of that area. And so NASCAR came down and they put the hammer down and said, this is not permissible. We gave you room to work within, and you give an inch and they want to take a mile. And that's exactly what happens when you give them that little bit of leeway. They'll take it to another level. So I think NASCAR did the right thing. I like that they are being more diligent, more vigilant in looking for those that are working outside of the specified area, because when NASCAR gives you rules, they do give you a little leeway on some of these things. And what we're seeing is they're taking advantage of that leeway, and it's not working. So I think NASCAR needs to be vigilant. And I would say shame on these guys. I know they're smart people. That if they can be, inside of that line versus outside of that line, I think it's better for the sport. And work with NASCAR and the R&D Center. If you've got an idea, take it to the R&D Center, let them test it, maybe they test it with just a few drivers to see how it works out compared to other drivers, but do it in a controlled environment. Don't be doing it on your own to give one driver that competitive advantage because that's not in line with NASCAR's direction of changing the culture within the organization. So that's just my take on it. I'll get off of my soapbox, Jay.
Well, that one, and it's a good one. And here's where I want to come from on that. Of first, let me say of when you talk about free for all, the Outlaws or Run What You Brung. Okay, that's a separate series. I do not want to see that. I'm not saying no rules. What I am saying is it seems, especially with the next gen car, as they said, okay, these parts are the one supplier you can't touch. Okay, I'll even get that. But there are areas where I think that they can give them a little more room to play around in. And that's where I say of open up some areas that do give them the engineering freedom to work within. And then it's not just one area. And again, I'm not exactly mechanical, but if you say, oh, we adjust a half pound of air pressure and then, a quarter inch on the shock, and the two of them together and they balance it out and find something, whereas they have more room. Whereas if you only have a quarter inch to play with here and a pound of pressure to play with there, you have no room, maneuverability room. You reference the bumper. And that is one where, as I say, what I'm advocating for, NASCAR did give them a little bit. They said you can work within this, and they went outside of it. To me, for the case I was trying to make, the team shot themselves in the foot. You got a little bit of play room. So, yeah, then if they give you that and you go outside of it, by all means, no, you went outside the box. Now we gave you a bigger box, and if you go outside of it, I'm all for then coming with the hammer, of that. So I got both sides of that. I want you to give them a little, or I want NASCAR to give them a little more room. If they go outside of that playroom, absolutely come with that hammer. If that's, hey, sit out next week, I would support that then as well. Because like I said, I'm saying you got some more playroom, stay within it. And if you go outside that, like I said, if you want to have an outlaw series of anything's legal, that's fine. But then everybody's there in the cost. That's the other aspect is NASCAR is trying to help them because we know what kind of money was being spent on testing, research, wind tunnel time. So NASCAR had to, for financial reasons, get that. And that's one of those, I think it goes back to Tony Stewart. Sometimes you got to save these teams from themselves, and I think that's part of why they wanted to single source parts. You can't modify them and everything. I understand that. And again, the cost, I agree, was getting out of hand. But I do think there are some areas where they could allow a little bit of playroom.
And you bring up an interesting point that NASCAR is saying, I forget how you said it now, but you were talking about NASCAR giving them a chance. They don't have a chance to test any longer. So what's happening is they're testing in racing conditions. And that's not necessarily a good thing. What if that test goes bad? But here's the thing. With the minimum weight requirement, they are given a leeway, Jay. They are given an area to work within. And they were outside of that area that they work within. And NASCAR usually weighs it, lets it sit for a little bit. If it doesn't meet the requirement, goes back and weighs it again. They might let it sit again, go back and test it again. It still didn't meet the weight requirement. So, NASCAR does give them every possible chance. And in this particular case, they did not meet that minimum weight requirement, even with the allowance.
And that's where I said, like I said, to start this, I had no sympathy there. That is one of those, what it is. I have an idea of fuel burn off. And some of this, I'm going back to the dirt tracks when it talks about that, a 1 pound per lap of burn off. I laughed there. I wasn't laughing at you or anything you said. It was one of those top driver, would win races, but would get DQ'd all the time. As soon as he crossed the line for the checkered flag, would dive down to the infield to pick up mud because he knew he was light. I mean,
Yes.
I can't imagine how many wins this driver, and I won't say his name, would have. But yeah, you'd see him, I mean, just dive directly into the infield and try and pick up as much mud as he could, knowing you're light when you cross the start-finish line. Like you said, if you can go up to the line, that a little bit over, just be that little bit on the other side of it where you don't have to worry about that. I'm like, when you said that, I was like, yeah, NASCAR is Sammy Smith. He had no chance to get mud on the car. But you're right, especially on the ride height. That is one where they allow you to readjust and set the tire pressures and the shocks settle and everything else, rebound in the shocks so that, it isn't accurate. It's not just an automatic. I believe most of the time, I think they do 3 measurements after a race if it's not meeting the standard. So yeah, I'm with you there. That's one where you're right. I mean, that's a black and white that they're not going to allow you to go beyond. So I got no sympathy there.
And let me just say this as well. Part of the reason, again, NASCAR is looking to level the playing field. The teams that are getting all these DQs and penalties are the teams that have the money to experiment. So the teams that can't experiment like this are the lower funded teams. So they're not necessarily getting those same types of penalties. So it's the have and the have-nots, and NASCAR is trying to put a stop to that.
And I have always noticed that, and I know we've talked about that. You're right. These other teams aren't on that edge because they can't afford to. You're 100% right. They can't take that risk. We talk about risk versus reward. Sammy Smith right now still has his 1 win. Sponsor in Junior Motorsports. They're going to be okay with this penalty. There's some organizations that can't. And I think back to, who was it? Carl Long, when he had a motor issue. I mean, that shut his team down, and this was many, many years ago.
Yes.
But I think it was $200,000 at that time. Yeah, that wiped out his entire company. They can't afford that.
And the other part of this is, I think that there should be different levels of penalties. First time you're caught, I think it should be one type of penalty, but that penalty should be much worse if you're caught a second time. If you're caught a third time, it should be even worse. It's got to hurt these drivers. You mentioned he's got to win. He's in the playoffs. At some point, you make them playoff ineligible if they continue. And I'd say that should be within an organization. You don't want to try something with this guy this week and the other guy next week to try to avoid the 3 strikes and you're out. If your organization is caught 1, 2, 3 times, your drivers are out of the playoffs. I mean, you got to make it hurt.
And Sharon, with that, like I said, if they give them some playroom and that's the case, I would be all for that type of system of that. Or again, first time is just regular season points. Second time is playoff points or the playoff win or something. I would absolutely support that because, like you said, then it carries that weight. You will not cross this line. We gave you, some space, but you will not cross it. So I'd fully support that of multiple violations starting to get into taking away wins or taking away playoff points and whatnot. I would absolutely be in favor of that.
Yeah, I think they've got to do something because obviously these teams are not getting the point that NASCAR is making of leveling the playing field and getting away from the haves and the have-nots. And if they're serious, it really does need to have a hammer associated with the penalties.
Well, I guess with that, and again, sticking with our topic tonight of the good, the bad, and the ugly, we saw that from the Indianapolis at the Indy 500. And I think it was qualifying where Penske teams were found to have 3 cars, two of the 3, or was it 3? I think it was 2 of the 3 that had some, and I'm going to try and relate it to the NASCAR side as best I can. Again, I am not a technology guy. What NASCAR has underneath the rear of the diffuser, Indy cars have something like that on the tail, on the fin, that was blocked off for show or to get a sponsor logo on there. I don't know exactly what the reason was. Did not appear to be a aero or race advantage. They said it actually borderlined on a safety issue, which again, there I'm like, no, don't be playing around with that, period. But they did penalize them. It was 3 of Team Penske's, or 2. Again, I think it was 2. And Penske reacted by 3 or 4 firings within the Penske organization, one of which is Tim Cindric, as that relates to NASCAR. But there again, I admire Roger Penske. He said, hey, they did it. We've had issues in the past. I'm taking action. And there were those within the organization that, are looking on the outside looking in now.
Yes, indeed. It was unfortunate for the Indy 500 to kind of get started with that news. But Roger Penske was in a very difficult situation. He owns that track. He is the owner of Team Penske, and he is very
as well as the series. That's where, because there was a key factor there. Yep.
Yes, there we go. The series. So it puts him in a very awkward situation, and I'm just shocked, as I'm sure a lot of people are, that his organization would put him in that position. And so I don't blame him for firing those individuals that he felt were responsible. Now, I know there's been a lot of question about Austin Cindric being in trouble now that his dad's not within Team Penske. And really, it's just crazy. But I don't see, and Austin Cindric has said it's not going to affect him in NASCAR. So, and I agree with that. I think that's let's not even go there realistically. But as far as the IndyCar and Team Penske and the situation there, it is unfortunate. And Tim Cindric, by the way, was more involved on the IndyCar side of Team Penske than he is on the NASCAR side of Team Penske. So let's get that out there as well. His son races in NASCAR, and I think that's the extent of it. But he was very much involved on the IndyCar side of it. They went too far, and from what I understand, there were some other things that were found post-race that have come up as well. And I know this isn't part of this particular topic, but Roger Penske takes these things very, very seriously. And you can see that by the fact that he reacted immediately by firing those individuals he felt were responsible. So I admire Roger Penske for that, because he's saying this needs to be on the up and up. And I wouldn't allow it from any other teams. I'm not going to allow it from my own team. So he did the right thing, in my estimation. And I don't think he should be criticized for that. I think that when you do things right and you do the right thing, you should be recognized as being a stalwart of this sport.
As a businessman, as a person, as a businessman, the organization, the integrity of the series, like you said, being the track owner, the series owner, and then a team owner, a lot of times that gets questioned. And in my opinion, Roger Penske said, I am not going to have those questions asked. We were wrong. It's been addressed. I'm taking care of it. And, again, protecting the integrity of the series, So, yeah, I think that set a very high standard, which we already knew Roger Penske has. when it comes to that. Now, some of the things I know with some of the drivers that have been over there, whether or not they can have a beard, the button-up shirts. Again, I was like, that's serious, but that's the standard he sets, and I think this just showed it. It's not at a low level of, oh yeah, I just want us to look. If that gets brought into question, he handled it. I mean, and I admire it. I hate that it happened. And then, like you said, and we'll follow up with that because I do have that up as far as the post-race stuff.
Yes.
But especially around the big race, when we talk about NASCAR, it's the Daytona 500. The Indianapolis 500 is a national event, if not international, that there's eyes on. So I think he did an amazing job in handling that, and he did so quickly. I think it was a day or two at most, 2 days maybe, that word came out that, hey, he had taken action.
And if I can kind of tie that back to our previous topic with penalties in NASCAR, when have we ever seen a NASCAR owner fire individuals within his organization for tampering with, with the car and violating NASCAR's rules and regulations? We haven't. So it just tells you how far NASCAR has to go to change that culture within their series. So, but Roger Penske has a NASCAR team. And Roger Penske, I think, we don't hear about too many penalties from Team Penske in NASCAR.
Absolutely not. And right now, I'm sure that maybe played into his mind of, hey, having 3 consecutive NASCAR championships with Joe Logano, Ryan Blaney. He doesn't want that question even asked about them, Yes. So like I said, I admire that. Now I understand, I want to say it's a little different. I don't know of that when it comes to that, because again, NASCAR was kind of founded on that aspect of, as you said earlier, if you're not cheating, you aren't trying. And you're right. No, NASCAR used that phrase of, we want to change that culture, for sure. And I understand that. Just some of the names that popped into my head of if owners had been that way, and I say I'd have to start at HMS. I mean, you got Ray Everham, Chad Knaus, of several of them. But that goes way back. I mean, I hear them talk about some of the stories of, I want to say it's Smokey Unick. The gas line where they said he should have been out of gas, and he finished the race and drove the car home, and the tubing he had underneath the seat, and Darrell Waltrip putting pellets in and dropping weight on the track during the race. Some of those old stories, they're good to hear, but you're right. NASCAR came along and said, hey, all right, we don't like this. And they never really put the hammer down, whereas in this day and age we are now, especially as it comes to inspections and everything else. So you're right. These teams are going to have to, and that may be what it comes to, and this is the first sign of, especially within the Team Penske organization, be like, we better mind our P's and Q's without a doubt.
Back when the Richmond thing happened with our playoffs, I wrote an article about integrity matters, and I got into a lot of that. And that still holds true. Integrity does matter. We would not tell our kids that if they were in a sport to cheat. I would hope we would not tell our kids to cheat in a high school sport or a school sport of any kind. So why in the world are we setting an example of cheating in major sports? We should not be doing that. Integrity matters. And we wonder why people have less respect. Integrity matters. It is paramount. And so I applaud NASCAR for trying to make that culture change within their organization. I really admire Roger Penske for doing what he did this weekend when he found that happening within his organization. He wasn't going to tolerate it. Integrity mattered to him. And so to me, that's a big deal.
And I don't know if that's what led into this or not, but it call it a coincidence of post-race, there were
Yes.
3 teams. Let's see. Andretti Global's Marcus Ericsson, who had finished second, was bumped back to 31st. Teammate Kyle Kirkwood. So the numbers 27 and 28 of the Andretti Global cars, they were discovered in post-race tech inspection to have modified their Dallara supplied energy management system covers and covered A-arm mounting points with unapproved spacers and parts. If somebody else knows what that means, good on you. I'm just reading it. It's one of those, okay, according to IndyCar release, EMS covers must be used as supplied. So again, modifying a one source part. I get that. Okay. Both these modifications provided the capability of enhanced aerodynamic efficiency to both Indy cars. And we talk about aero in NASCAR, but in IndyCar, that's very important. So let me see if I can find the third one. I know there was a third one. I'm not seeing it in this article. Sharon, do you have one that shows the third team that was penalized with that? Because there were 3.
Did you talk about Prima Racing?
No, that there you go.
Yeah. Premium Racing's statement on the Callum Ilott penalty moved from 12th to 33rd with a $100K fine to the team and team manager suspended for Detroit for left front ring end plate not meeting minimum height.
Okay.
So their statement is following the Indy 500, the number 90 Prima car driven home in P12 by Callum Ilott was found in breach of the technical regulations due to front ring end plate not meeting the minimum height. As a consequence, the team was disqualified from the race and received accessory sanctions. While the same wing was completely original, successfully passed tech several times throughout the month, and the issue didn't lead to any performance gain, the car ended up being non-compliant with the rules at the end of the race. So the team accepts full responsibility. The team is currently investigating the root of the problem, which can involve incidents in fitment or production issues. We look forward to implementing the needed procedures to ensure improved control and avoid these kind of issues in the future. So that's their statement.
Yeah, I knew there was a third one. I had to scroll further down. I guess I got caught up with you there. So yeah, the first one, the 2 Andretti Global teams, obviously the same issue, modifying a part that you're just not allowed to touch. And there again, I understand there are certain parts, if that's the rules, then that's the rules. And by all means, what was it, $100,000, second place and a 6th, 7th place finish to 33rd. Man, that's gotta hurt. I mean that. So I got nothing to say. You got caught with your hand in the cookie jar and it got slapped.
Yes, and again, it comes to the integrity of the sport. One of the things that I also saw on social media today, in fact, I bookmarked it. Let me go back to that. There were the viewership, 2025 Indy 500, 7.050 million viewers. The Daytona 500 this year had 6.761 million viewers. So more than the Daytona 500. This is the third time in the past 30 years that the IndyCar 500 got bigger viewership than the Daytona 500 per Fox. Both races this year had weather delays, but Daytona's was longer. The others came in 21, Daytona impacted by weather, and 95, neither impacted by weather. So it's really interesting that they got such high viewership this year for the Indy 500 and for the Coca-Cola 600. Viewership was up across the line for both of those races. So, when you get that kind of viewership, you got to make sure that integrity matters.
Well, this is going to be counter productive to what we've been talking about, Sharon, and it comes from somebody that worked within the wrestling industry. The name of his book is Controversy Creates Cash.
Yeah.
If that were a case of you weren't going to watch the Indy 500, but you've heard that they've had some team penalties and this and that. I mean, that does create, that possibility that people were tuning in to see what was going to happen if these cars got back to where they were. Hate to get viewership that way by all means, but just like any time we've seen it, if you got a fight one week, that the viewership the next week may go up because you want to see if they're going to go at it again. So there is something to that. Again, that's not how I would want to bring it in, but it is part of the world. That goes back to, and you talked about it, and I covered my face. I know you saw me; you were laughing at me. Yeah. Again, I was in the car Monday morning after these announcements, and they started talking about Austin Cindric, and I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. He's got nothing to do with anything. He drives, on the NASCAR side, and all of a sudden, I was just like, man, people need to find a hobby, a different hobby.
Yeah, but going back to your controversy creates attention. Here's the thing, too. I know I never liked the idea that they showed wrecks and crashes to advertise NASCAR. Why do you want to take the negative part of what happens in the race and use that to increase viewership? Well, the answer to that is that it does bring in viewers. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. But there's a lot of really great racing that happens within NASCAR as well. But people don't respond to that in the same way. I would, but I am probably the minority of people that would respond to that. But, getting back to the post-race penalties in IndyCar, it sounds like these guys want to get to the root cause of what happened. It sounds like they don't like what happened, and they want to protect that integrity of the sport. And that makes me feel really good about what they're doing. Now, was that across the board? I'm not sure. But from what I read, it sounded like teams were really interested in knowing what happened at the root level, and they want to do things to correct those problems. So that's a good thing. So, Jay?
Well, and that's what, and I understand that. I had two things to follow up on. First off, of going back to NASCAR, again, of just talking about the, not necessarily even showing the wrecks, but the fighting after a race. Mm-hmm. It's tough to argue that when you talk about what put NASCAR on the map truly back in, what was it, 79, I believe, right? The fight in the infield, the first time it was broadcast nationally. So, I mean, it is a part of it. We talk about, I know we specifically talked about the Hail Melon when that move was made, and NASCAR right away said, hey, we're going to do something about that. And yet that still gets shown as an illegal move because it was spectacular, no doubt. And at that point was within the rules. Again, it wasn't legal at the time, but was immediately declared not so after it happened. So it's a fine line. I hear what you're saying as far as they use the wrecks. But when we've had the 3-wide finish we saw between Kyle Busch, Chris Buescher, and Daniel Suarez, they also use that to try and bring in the race aspect to it. But that is all part of it. And especially, right now, I would say like Bowman Gray, they still advertise it as the Madhouse. It's tough to get away from that. I mean, it really is. And I'm guilty of it. I don't want to see it every week, but I will go back and watch some of the highlights occasionally. We have some of them. We could film at Jackson Motor Speedway. We kind of did this past weekend. The occasional situation, to me, as long as that's not the main focus, if you will, of that. Now, you were talking about the other team that was penalized. I understand occasionally something does happen and it was a slip. It got through. The problem is that's always everybody's answer. Oh, we didn't mean to. There was no advantage to it. We got to change a procedure to make sure something. Unfortunately, I would say that it does occasionally happen. We all make mistakes. However, as Larry McReynolds always like to say, if you're the sanctioning body, you can't rule based on intent. Because again, what's everybody going to say? I didn't mean to do it.
Exactly. Nobody intentionally does those things, right?
Right. What was it when they were having the issue with intentionally bringing out a yellow flag? Kyle Busch said, I did not intentionally spin out, and then winks. It's like, I'm not going to admit it. I don't care what you try and drag out of me, and everybody knows it's happening, but yeah, you don't admit it. So.
Exactly right.
But no, I do think that there are occasions where, they said it, they'd had it on there the whole month prior and it didn't have the issue for whatever reason. This time it did. Same with the part. I understand sometimes a part gets put on or whatever, but, the sanctioning body has to, like you said, for the integrity of the sport, take care of it.
Yes, indeed. So what have we not talked about yet, Jay?
Well, this last one, and I don't know how I sent it to you earlier, you got championship race at Charlotte. I was not, and we could have that discussion by all means. I know that was one that was kind of discussed. The weather would be the issue there. I was saying we look at the championship contenders following Charlotte. It's being the midway of the regular season of a quick look at maybe who we think could be our championship contenders. I'm not saying fill out the championship 4 bracket yet, but take a look at who we think the championship, really, truly championship contenders are in each series.
Well, and I'm all for doing that, but I do want to talk about this.
Did I miss one?
Yeah, the one that I saw on Jayski's, as a matter of fact, is where I saw it, where they talked about superb competition at Charlotte makes a case for a championship race. And that was
okay.
NASCAR's wire service. So I thought we needed to discuss that because they're saying the historical high temperature in Concord, North Carolina in early November is 66 degrees. Why is that statistic relevant to stock car racing? NASCAR is considering possible venues for the season-ending championship weekend, which will start to move in rotation next year with the return of Homestead Miami. So I thought it might be worth a conversation here.
Yeah, I think it did a little bit when we did have that discussion when they announced that it would be rotating. Excuse me. It is right on that borderline of, do you put yourself at risk based on weather? And the other is that, I don't want to say knee-jerk reaction, but they've talked about it with several other tracks. You see a great race there, and then you're like, oh, this is where the championship needs to be. Well, last week you said it needed to be there. The week before you said it needed to be here. And I understand that. That's great that we're seeing great racing at all these tracks. However, there again, you got to factor in even, and we've been doing the Roval the last several years in the playoffs, not quite into November. I think that the Roval Charlotte race there with the Roval is in October. You could be talking about colder temperatures. Then all of a sudden that changes the track and you don't get that same type of great racing because you're losing grip or something don't work quite right. That's where you got to be careful about that. And I'm calling it a knee-jerk reaction of that, that something we're just not factoring in at this point. And unfortunately, we wouldn't have it until we have a bad race there. We put the championship there. They have a bad race. And then everybody's like, well, who made that decision? Well, y'all did. No. I certainly do think, and like I said, I know it was at least discussed as I'll say outside possibility. They wouldn't rule it out. Even I think Kansas was maybe the other one getting into the Midwest. But again, you're putting yourself at risk. Now, if we have a weather issue, snow or otherwise. Even New Hampshire ran a race at the end of a season. I think that was in 2001, because it wasn't that 9/11 that pushed that back, and they ran it Thanksgiving weekend. They got a nice weekend. It worked. Do you want to do that on a kind of regular basis and put all your hope in that basket? Yeah, probably not. But I certainly wouldn't rule it out. And as of right now, the 1.5 mile tracks have produced some great racing with this next gen car. So yeah, it's worthy of discussion. There is that higher risk because you're starting to get into the weather issue. And as I said, all races we're comparing it to are warmer. I understand what you're putting out as far as the typical or standard temperatures. What happens though when it's a colder weather? And we saw that at Bristol with the tires when we had that, and they couldn't figure out what the problem was.
Yeah, let's face it, bad weather can happen at any track. We've had rainouts at Daytona. We've had rainouts at Talladega. We've had, tracks that should be, California a few years ago couldn't seem to get a race in anywhere. And they normally have fantastic weather. And yet it was rain out after rain out after rain out. Charlotte Motor Speedway does put on a good race. There's no doubt about it. We watched a fantastic race in the Coke 600. But you're right. The weather is going to impact the quality of that race. In November, it's going to be an entirely different race. And we've seen that with Martinsville. Martinsville is a different race in the spring than it is in the fall. So there's so many unpredictables that can go into this. We talked about Nashville as a possibility, understanding that Nashville could have cold weather for November. So it might not be a good idea. Could it be postponed in favor of better weather later? Probably you could, but you'd probably have to wait quite a while for it to get that better weather to come along. So NASCAR needs to really put their heads together and come up with a rotation of tracks, which is what I know they are doing. But the fact that this was put out by the wire service, it's not put out by NASCAR when it's put out by the wire service, by the way. It's put out by one of the people who are credentialed by NASCAR to do those wire service articles. But this is their opinion, and what they felt would be a one track that could be considered. So yeah, their temperatures are maybe milder than it might be at Memphis or not Memphis, but Nashville. So they're probably better than they would be at Chicagoland Speedway if that were one of the tracks in consideration. But the point is, you're going to take a risk just about anywhere. So even if they go to a warm weather climate, rain is always a possibility in November. So that's why they have what they call the cruise season. And why they don't book cruises in the fall, because there's always a risk of bad weather. So it's hard to say what's going to be the best locations, but I would put my money on a warm weather location versus a cooler weather location.
The other one that was discussed, this again, especially after a couple of really good races there, was Atlanta Motor Speedway. And I know we've had the championship there. It was there for many years. I think that was where it was before it went to Homestead, Miami, which held it for several years. And Sharon, I know you've heard this. I was there. Jeff Gordon was there because that was when he was winning championships. It was cold. It was cold. So that one too, you run that risk. And I hate to say it this way, but they're like, oh, they used to host it, and then there's good racing. There's a reason it went away from Atlanta. it was cold. The fans were not in the stands. So
do you remember when it snowed at Bristol?
I do, and you're right. You hit it exactly right there. We understand anything could happen. We could have an 80 degree weather day at Charlotte in November. So then that's where you get that flip flop of, and man, I feel so bad for track owners when that happens, things like that. Well, why'd you cancel? You could have run it. Man, if you can predict the weather, by all means, I'll hire you and you'll be my number one paid person. But yeah, like I said, Atlanta falls in that category. Would I be opposed to seeing them? Because it's not an actual super speedway. It races like one now. We've had some great races there. And again, this was right after we had the 3 wide finish when everybody wanted to start saying, oh, put the championship at Atlanta. Again, that's, you're going with the last 10 seconds of what you like. So be careful about that. But I do think those are ones that should be at least discussed and really delved into of what are the chances of this,
Yes.
Now, and that's where the stats you provided of over the past 10 years, what's the temperature been? But I go back to what is the car going to do? It's not just about getting the fans into the stands. That's important, obviously. But do we know what the car's going to do, what the tire's going to do in reaction to this possibility of colder temperature? So you really got to watch that. Again, don't envy NASCAR's position by any means, because once they announce it, there's going to be fans that want it here, don't want it there, or whatever it be.
Well, here's what I would suggest, is that if you have a location like a Charlotte Motor Speedway or Atlanta Motor Speedway or Nashville. If you have one of those locations, have a contingency plan that can work. I'm hearing my feedback for some reason, but have a contingency plan that if the weather is bad, and you can judge the weather a lot closer, where you could change the venue. And I know there's a lot of hard work that goes into that, but if you have a contingency plan, you've got 2 places that are putting in all that hard work, and there's a cost that's associated with that. But maybe there's some way to have a contingency plan that is no frills, if you will, in case of bad weather at one of the locations that you have. But make it closer to home so that these guys don't have to make that trip, or it's easy to do the turnaround or whatever, if you will. That's just a thought off the top of my head. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but just a thought.
Yeah, well, and it's one of those and that's what it takes. So is thinking outside the box. Once you get the idea out there, breaking it down. For the teams and drivers, that's one thing. The facility, and let's just use your example of, okay, we're going to run Nashville. The backup is Las Vegas. They run earlier in the season. It's not like they shut down and they aren't prepared. However, then you're talking about the fans that had tickets to go to Nashville, hotel reservations. You'd have to have that partnership of Marriott in Nashville transferring reservation, plane tickets. Yeah, I mean,
it's a lot of coordination. Yeah.
Especially, like I said, the teams would be one thing, the fans would be the other side, and yeah, that would.
Or another regional location that might be having better weather than that particular location.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that's your outside the box thought. Boy, that'd be tough though.
I get a point for outside the box thought.
Absolutely. Put it on there of, okay, these 4, we'll go with 4 of Miami, Las Vegas, Atlanta, and Charlotte. And come the end of the season, that'd be kind of cool now that I'm thinking about it. Spin the wheel, whichever one it hits, there you go. You don't know until afterwards. The championship, the championship
The wheel
four
of
have been
fortune.
determined. Yeah, the championship four have been determined. Let's find out where they're going to race. Wing!
Yeah. But for fans too, making their plans is
Right, like I said, that's where you run into the issue is you can't plan for that. Then of like, all right, y'all got a week. Get your plane tickets booked.
yeah. So, well, anyway, like I said, it was just a thought that ran through my head. But my thoughts that run through my head are not always good thoughts.
Well, no, I mean, just the fact that you really did put that in my head, then I built off of that and be like, yeah, get 4 or 5 and just spin the wheel. And all right, we know who's eligible. Let's find out where we're going to race.
Okay, we're at 10:39. Do we want to go with your next topic of championship contenders?
Yeah, I don't think that'd take that long. And I apologize. Like I said, I really thought maybe I'd gotten mixed up in how I typed out what my topic. I didn't realize that was an actual new one you had put up there.
Okay. Is this just for the Cup Series tonight, or do we want all 3?
Well, it's just me and you. I think we could do all 3.
Okay.
I know there's obviously some heavy favorites if you want to start with the trucks. You know, we kind of already talked about that in the review just today, but top 2 in points. Yeah, top 2 in points. So pencil Corey Hyman, Chandler Smith in, if you will. Who do you think goes with them?
Yeah, let me pull up some thoughts. I got to look at the schedule here to pull my thoughts together on some of this. We're in trucks.
Yeah.
Oh, let's see. In the truck series, Corey Heim definitely. He already has the win. We know that Chandler Smith has the 2 wins. The other 2 drivers are Tyler Ankrum and Grant Enfinger. I think Tyler Ankrum has had a pretty solid season. I'm sorry, Tyler Ankrum and Daniel Hemrick. I misspoke there. Are the other 2 with wins. There's so many drivers that could rise to the occasion here. It's so hard to predict. I know we're approaching midpoints, and actually in the truck series, we're past the midpoint. I think they only have 7 more races for their regular. Geez. So much can happen. And we've had drivers that are just having a rough start, but could come around. I think about Ty Majeski in that regard, Ben Rhodes, both of them. Ty Majeski is the defending champion. Ben Rhodes is a 2-time champion. And Grant Enfinger, you never know when he could come alive. So all of them I see as drivers that could get wins and start having a good run after having such a horrible start. And that makes such a huge difference here. I can only commit to 2 at this point, Jay.
And I'd have to stick with that. And again, it may be that, and I would say Corey Heim is all but a lock into the championship 4, but that's not a guarantee. Chandler Smith has had a couple, and fortunately one of them was this past weekend. I'm with you. Of Tyler Ankrum, again, only has the 1 win, but starts out the season so strong and seems to stay consistent. So I would kind of push him in as maybe my 3rd one. And then without wins, the next 2, and you mentioned one of them, Grant Enfinger, as we saw last year, heating up at the right time, just came up a little short. The other would be the one right behind him in Lane Riggs, because we saw him do that last year. So there's where I would pull the one of not maybe expected or we haven't seen it yet. Right. But again, the last 2 weeks, he had shots at winning the last 2 weeks. Just kind of stepped on his own foot, if you will. Otherwise, you could be talking about him having 2 wins. So those would be the 2 that I would maybe, or 3, Tyler Ankrum, Grant Enfinger. But you're right. Ty Majeski, we know, is a championship team, as well as Ben Rhodes. Right now, I mean, honestly, though, Ben Rhodes needs to work on getting in the playoffs.
Yes.
Even going a little further down, we've seen it before, just not here recently, Rajah Caruth. And again, what they lost or are missing this year, we just haven't seen what we've seen from him in the past.
That is so true. And you're right. I'm working down the list now. He would be the one that would be a standout that's below the cut line that could kind of come to life. We'll have to wait and see how it plays out. Matt Crafton, we know he's a previous champion in the series as well. The veteran of the sport has raced all of the races. But
I hate to say it, but we have not seen that championship
yes, I know,
level out of them in, I'd say, maybe 3 years, 2 years, if not 3 years. Still running, and I think would have a shot to win, although we haven't seen that a whole lot as of recent either. That's why I said I just don't see them flipping the switch that hard, that far.
So what about the Xfinity Series? Who are your contenders in the Xfinity Series?
I was going to say, you think the Truck Series was hard? Guess what? We're going up a level, and we're going to get to the Cup.
It's going to be even harder here.
Yeah, here, honestly, to me, I think you got three that are hard penciled in or getting close to it in Justin Allgaier, Austin Hill, and Sam Mayer. And Sam Mayer does not have a win yet. However, I would still, based on consistency week in and week out, not having the roller coaster ride of good 1 week and bad 1 week, that I could almost pencil him in pretty solid as the third one. The fourth one is where, because you go down the list then of drivers that do have a win, you go all the way down to 13th where Sammy Smith is now with his. Who else? Oh, that's Eric Almirola. I think this one is your fourth one, is the one you really probably got to lightly pencil in, and I say very lightly. Connor Zilic as a rookie. We've seen what he can do coming back even from an injury. I still have faith in Sheldon Creed. I know he's kind of had a slide, but if he can find what his teammate Sam Mayer has, and that's skipping over 2 with wins, Jesse Love and Brandon Jones. But I'll go with the rookie. I'll go with Connor Zilic as a rookie.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. He would be my fourth one as well. I do think that there's several drivers that could come up with a win, but the question is which drivers are going to be there at the end with the final 4 drivers contending for that championship. And it's hard to say. There are a few drivers that I think could still come up with that victory and put themselves more in contention. There are a few drivers that I think could go on a hot streak and peak at just the right time that would make them championship contenders. At this point, I think it's the 3 that you said for sure, and possibly Connor Zilic as the surprise one in that championship 4. But time always tells the rest of the story. So let's go ahead and move on to the Cup Series.
Well, what I would love to see there, and right now is 7th, just having a phenomenal season and the improvement we've seen, at least make it to the round of 8 is Ryan Sieg. And he just took a hit this past weekend too. To see them make the round of 8 would be a great accomplishment for that team. Man, to see them make the championship 4 would be amazing.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, you want to talk about the Cup Series? I'm going to let you go first because this one is wide open.
Well, I think we do have a big 3 at least.
I'd agree with that.
And the big 3, of course, are William Byron, Kyle Larson, and Christopher Bell. William Byron, of those 3, is leading the points by 29 points over Kyle Larson and Christopher Bell, that both have the 3 wins. So 29 points over Kyle Larson, 74 points over Christopher Bell. And that all has to do with the stage wins. Christopher Bell is winning races, but he's not racking up those stage points like Kyle Larson is with 8 stage wins. William Byron has the 6 stage wins that give him 11 points. Denny Hamlin I think also has to be put into that mix. The driver I want to be in that mix is Ryan Blaney, but he's just had a horrible, horrible start to the season. It's not because he's not running well. He's just not closing it out. Ross Chastain is showing some signs of really having a good season if he can kind of keep it up. So we'll have to see what happens, but I think the big three are there. It's a matter of who's going to slide into that fourth spot, Jay.
Well, and as much as I hate to say it, from one aspect of, you're right, it's almost already 4 because you put Denny Hamlin with the 2 wins and 12 playoff points. But you hit on Ryan Blaney as well as Joey Logano. Joey Logano was supposed to be out of the playoffs last year, got back in it, and took advantage of it. So we know that can happen. The other ones that, and I don't know how far you could go down to make it to the championship for Chase Elliott. I know they talked about this I think it was Kevin Harvick on one of the pre-races said, running top 10 probably isn't going to get you to the championship 4 without wins. He's right now the driver in 4th, as well as then Tyler Reddick before we get to Denny Hamlin. And then you mentioned Ryan Blaney and Ross Chastain, Joey Logano. Last year, it's down to 10th. Last year, Alex Bowman, up until getting knocked out due to the penalty and a weight issue, was one of the drivers that was having a good start to the playoffs of top 5s. Would that have carried him to the championship 4? Probably not. So then, like you said, it becomes this year of who can go on that tear at any point. And even where he's at in 16th with the Wood brothers, Josh Berry, obviously having a very good season. Yeah. But there again, just gets on a cold streak as well, and you can't be having that as you're going for a championship. So I really think you got to look at that up top. The one, and I'm going to be like I said earlier, that 10 seconds ago, what happened. So after this weekend, could Ross Chastain be? I know, like I said, I'm going right back to what just happened. But we've also said, hey, once they get the organization squared away, that we've seen that, because we've seen Ross Chastain. I believe it was in 2023. He won the race over Ryan Blaney. Blaney got the championship. So it's not out of the realm by any means, but we're going to have to see that momentum continue.
Exactly right. It's all about the momentum at the right time and peaking at the right time and having that crystal ball that will tell us what's going to happen.
Right.
Which we don't have.
All right. Well, we'll do this again at least when we know who the 16 championship are and we know a little bit closer as to how the team's momentum are going. I just thought here at the midway point, as the Cup and Xfinity are right on that halfway mark, what the thoughts were. It's definitely been an interesting season. Just getting into the playoffs again, there you wouldn't even be able to identify that, because I do think we got a couple that are outside the top 16. Again, going to the most recent race of Carson Hocevar, Michael McDowell, a couple of these drivers, Ty Gibbs. Coming up road courses, Shane Van Gisbergen going to have to be in that conversation. Brad Keselowski had a good run. To see him come from 30, I think he's up to 32nd now in points. Yeah. That would be one of those of comebacks of all time, if you will. So definitely going to be interesting.
Just to put it in perspective, 7 races left in the regular season for the Truck Series, 14 races for Xfinity Series, and 13 races for the Cup Series. So we are at that midway point and beyond in some cases, and the countdown is beginning.
There you go.
So
we definitely have some favorites. What do we go? Top 2, top 3, and then top 4, actually, like I said. Hamlin is one of those, and that's the only, and I say negative of, it's facts. Denny Hamlin hasn't ever won the championship, just doesn't seem to be able to close it out, whether he's in the 4 or not. He is one of those two. We just see he seems to be real streaky.
Excuse me. It's getting past my bedtime, Jay.
Right. All right. Well,
Okay.
there you have it.
The good, bad, and the ugly for our NASCAR Hot Topic Sound Off episode 2514. So stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be more hot topics down the road here, and we'll be here to discuss them. Chris, if you're tuning in, we do miss you. We need to have that contrarian on our panel here, and you're our go-to guy for that. So we hope you're able to make it back for next week's Hot Topic Sound Off after Nashville. So top 3 series, all racing at Nashville this coming weekend. I suspect there'll be some things to talk about, Jay.
Oh yeah, Nashville definitely should provide some good hot topics for us. Right now, my feelings are hurt. Apparently, I didn't argue with you enough tonight.
Usually you and I tend to agree, but we did have a few disagreements tonight, but I thought we handled it well.
I'll have to work on my skills of being, I don't even know if I can say the word contrarian. All right. There's our word of the week. We weren't using speculation this week. We're using contrarian. Okay,
contrarian of the week. What are you going to be doing this weekend?
This weekend, I don't even know. I don't know yet what I'm doing tomorrow. Jackson, unfortunately, just a quick, I know I mentioned it a couple of times, had some issues with weather. Weather moved on, but the track didn't have power, so they called the race, and then the power came back on, and we ran heats, and we're good to go. Brought the features out, and I thought, as a lot of the track workers did, the lights started strobing, if you will, flashing and alternating. Like, hey, it's Memorial Day. That's quite a show. And all of a sudden over the radio, they're like, we're not doing that. It did it on its own. Couldn't get them to come back on in a normal fashion. And then we lost power again. So 2 weeks we'll be doing double features as we have to do the makeup for it.
Yeah. And you're not alone. I know a lot of places are running into that issue. So we'll just hope for the best this weekend at Nashville. Hopefully the weather will be beautiful and we'll be able to see all 3 races. And for the other tracks around the country that have been dealing with weather delays and situations. I know Colorado National, they had to cancel their festivities, their races the day after the ARCA West race.
Right.
To them ending that race short. So we'll pray for good weather, and hopefully we'll have a good weekend coming up here as well. I will be watching all 3 races and taking notes and looking for our Hot Topic Sound Off topics going into next week's Hot Topics at 10 o'clock Eastern, 9 o'clock Central, and 7 p.m. On the Pacific Coast. So thanks, Jay. I really appreciate all that you do. I'll tell you, coming to YouTube, it's been a lot more labor intensive than what we had before.
Well, that's more on your side, so I'll say thank you to you. I just show up when we can and record them. I know you do the editing and everything else and getting them set up, so appreciate what you do. And you just gave me something to do for the week. I now have a goal for the week. I'm first off, find the dictionary here in my house, and I'm going to come up with the new word of the week.
For next week, okay.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
Well, your flexibility has been monumental this season. So it has been in previous seasons as well, but especially this season, your flexibility has been really big in ensuring that we've been able to let the show go on.
Right. The show must go on. There we go.
There you go. So thanks a lot, Jay. And everybody, I hope you have a good week. And do watch for our previews. We have more coming soon. We'll have the previews that Jay and I will put together for Nashville and reviews on the following Monday, as well as our Hot Topic Sound Off. So I think we've got an interview in the works as well. So stay tuned. We hope to have that coming up sometime somewhere down the road here as well. So, Jay, thanks for all you do, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Video.
All right.
Take care, everybody.